Leo's life was a study in gentle repetition. Each morning, he coaxed his 6-year-old daughter, Lily, into her special ergonomic chair, her small, fragile body settling into its contours. He would tie her shoes, her feet were never quite warm enough, and fix her hair, talking to her all the while in a calm, steady voice that was a balm against the world's constant, jarring chaos. He would drop her off at a specialized daycare, a place with soft lights and quieter voices, before making the pilgrimage to his own quiet corner of the city, a cubicle on the 34th floor of Sterling Enterprises. The Sterling building was a cathedral of glass and steel, a place of hard angles and hushed ambition. The air was chilled, and the atmosphere was dominated by the unseen presence of its founder, Mr. Sterling. The CEO was a titan, a man whose decisions could reshape entire industries with a single phone call. He was also an enigma, a man who had vanished from public life 5 years ago after a personal tragedy no one dared to speak about, returning only to rule his empire from a penthouse office as inaccessible as a fortress. Rumors, of course, were the lifeblood of a company this large. They whispered of a terrible car accident, of a lost wife, of a daughter left broken. The most persistent, and the one most strictly enforced, was about the CEO's daughter, Clara Concy. She was said to reside in a private, soundproofed lounge on the 40th floor, an opulent cage designed to protect her from a world that had almost killed her. The rule, passed down from the top and communicated in no uncertain terms to every employee, was simple: don't talk to her, don't even look at her. She is to be left alone. The warning was delivered with such cold finality that it sounded less like an instruction and more like a sentence. For most, the warning was easy to obey. The 40th floor was for executives only, a different world of hushed carpets and private elevators. Leo, a data analyst whose job involved sifting through endless spreadsheets, had no reason to ever go there. But one Friday afternoon, a server outage in the company's main data center meant he had to access a physical backup drive in a sub-server room on the 41st floor. The backup was a bust, and the server remained offline. Leo, tired and defeated, decided to take the stairs down, preferring the slow descent to the claustrophobia of the service elevator. It was a choice that would change his life. The stairwell was connected by a short, glass-walled walkway on the 40th floor, a passage usually sealed by security protocols, but for some reason, the automatic lock was disengaged, the door ajar by a few inches. Through the gap, Leo saw it, the private lounge, too. It was a space designed for tranquility, a Zen garden suspended in the sky, with a single massive pane of glass offering a breathtaking view of the city below. And in the center of it, alone, was a young woman in a high-tech wheelchair, looking out at the city. She was beautiful in a way that defied the sterile surroundings. Her hair, the color of spun gold, was cut in a severe bob that framed a face of delicate bone structure. Her eyes, however, were the most striking feature. They were the color of the sky on a perfect summer day, and they were filled with a profound, aching loneliness that Leo recognized instantly. It was the same look he had seen in his own daughter's eyes on days when her body refused to cooperate, when the world felt too big and too fast. An invisible cord seemed to pull him. The warning, a cold, faceless command, vanished from his mind. He didn't think about Mr. Sterling's fearsome reputation, or the risk to his job, his only means of providing for Lily. He only saw the loneliness in her eyes, a kind of solitude he knew intimately. He pushed the glass door open a fraction more, the low hum of the air conditioning the only sound. The woman didn't turn her head. He walked in, his soft-soled shoes making no noise on the plush carpet. He sat down on a simple, elegant bench a few feet away, a respectful distance. He didn't say anything for a long time. He simply sat. After a few minutes, he finally spoke. His voice was soft, barely a whisper. "It's funny, isn't it? The world keeps turning, and we're just sitting here, watching it go." Her eyes, which had been fixed on the horizon, slowly turned toward him. There was no fear in them, only a quiet, deep surprise. He wasn't a security guard or an executive. He was a man in a slightly rumpled shirt, with a day's worth of exhaustion in his shoulders. He smiled gently. "My name's Leo. I work downstairs. I have a daughter, Lily. She's 6. She loves to draw. She's got a whole notebook full of monsters that look like they belong in a cartoon." He pulled out his phone and showed her a picture of Lily's latest masterpiece. A purple, one-eyed creature with a toothy grin. "This one is named Grumble Grumble." A faint tremor seemed to pass through her hands, which were resting limply in her lap. Her eyes flickered from the picture back to his face. A spark, a tiny, almost imperceptible spark of warmth, ignited in their depths. He returned to the 40th floor the next day, and the next. The security guard on duty, a stern-faced man who looked like he'd been carved from a block of granite, saw him and gave him a hard, warning stare. Leo simply gave a small, polite nod and walked past him, a quiet act of rebellion. He didn't bring up the warning, or the fear, or the power of her father. He just talked. He talked about Lily's progress, about the small, everyday triumphs, and the moments of heartbreaking frustration. He talked about the strange, new coffee shop he'd discovered, and the absurdity of corporate memos. He brought her small gifts. A smooth, gray riverstone he'd found on a walk with Lily. A single, perfect white orchid he'd discreetly liberated from the lobby's floral arrangement. And, most importantly, one of Lily's drawings. The one of Grumble Grumble. She would communicate with her eyes. A slow, deliberate blink meant yes. A rapid flutter meant no. A long, steady gaze meant keep talking. He learned to read her like a book. Her name was Clara. She was 23 years old. The accident had left her with locked-in syndrome. Her mind was a fortress, her body a prison, and her father, in his desperate, misguided attempt to protect her from the pain of her condition, had built a second, social prison around her. He had believed that if she was left alone, if no one gave her hope of a world she couldn't have, her heart would eventually find a kind of peace. He had been so terribly, profoundly wrong. The day Graves, Mr. Sterling's head of security, cornered him was inevitable. Graves was a man with a military bearing and a cold, predatory gleam in his eyes. He grabbed Leo by the arm and pulled him into an empty stairwell. "You've been told," Graves hissed, his voice a low growl. "You've been warned. What do you think you're doing, talking to her?" Leo's gaze didn't waver. "I'm talking to a person, Graves. A person who looks like she needs someone to talk to." Graves sneered. "You think you're a hero. You think you're special. That woman is a medical marvel. Her father has a team of the best doctors in the world. He's spent a fortune on her. He knows what's best for her. And what's best is absolute zero stimulation. You're a risk. You're a liability. With all due respect, Leo said, his voice quiet but firm, I don't think a life of absolute zero is a life at all. Graves's face went white with fury. You're fired, he said, his voice trembling. Right now, go clean out your desk. Security will escort you out. He was walking back to his cubicle, the words ringing in his ears, when a voice from behind him stopped him cold. Mr. Vance. It was Mr. Sterling. The CEO stood in the middle of the hallway, a formidable presence, even in the relative anonymity of the corporate floor. His eyes, as cold and hard as a winter sky, were fixed on Leo. Graves was standing a few feet behind him, a look of smug satisfaction on his face. Graves tells me you've been spending time on the 40th floor, Mr. Sterling said, his voice surprisingly soft. It was a practiced calm, a predator's stillness before the pounce. And he says you've been talking to my daughter. Leo took a deep breath. There was no point in lying. Yes, sir, I have. You were warned explicitly. Do you have any idea what you have risked? What you have put her through? I know what I've risked, sir, Leo said, his voice gaining a slight defiant edge. I know what it's like to see someone you love trapped in a body that won't obey. My daughter, Lily, has a rare muscular degenerative disease. Some days, she can't even hold a spoon. Other days, she can't speak. The only thing worse than the disease itself is the silence of the world around her. The people who pretend she isn't there. He paused, looking directly into the CEO's unblinking eyes. I sat with your daughter because I couldn't bear the thought of her being alone. I didn't see a liability. I saw a person. Mr. Sterling's face was a mask of unreadable emotion. He looked at Graves, who quickly averted his gaze. The CEO turned back to Leo. Come with me, K. He led Leo back to the 40th floor, not through the service stairwell, but through his private office. As they walked, he spoke, his voice no longer cold, but laced with a deep, bottomless pain. 5 years ago, Clara and her mother were in a car accident. My wife, she didn't make it. Clara's body was fine. No broken bones, but her brain, it was a single, devastating impact. She was left with no control over her body, not a single muscle. The doctors gave me a prognosis of a few months. But she was a fighter. She survived. She got stronger. And then, I started to notice. Whenever someone would talk to her, or try to interact with her, a monitor would show a spike. A neurological spike. The doctors, brilliant men who had no answer, theorized that any hope, any reminder of the world outside, was causing a kind of mental and emotional torment that was physically manifesting as a form of neurological shock. They told me that for her to survive, she had to be left in silence. In complete, utter solitude. He stopped outside the lounge. So that's what I did. I built this room. This cage. I stopped her friends from visiting. I stopped talking to her myself, except for the bare essentials. I locked her in, believing I was saving her. But what I did, what I've done for the past 5 years, it hasn't saved her. It's killed her, a little bit every day. He looked at Leo, his eyes filled with a raw, unexpected vulnerability. And then you came along. You, a man with nothing to gain, who walked past a warning I had enforced with all the power I possess, and you simply sat with her. And every time you came, the nurses would tell me that the neurological spikes, they weren't happening, they were gone. You were talking to her, and she was calm. They walked into the lounge. Clara was sitting in her chair, looking at the city. She turned her head as they entered, and her eyes, as they fell on Leo, lit up with a warmth that was both pure and beautiful. Mr. Sterling walked over and stood by her chair, looking down at his daughter with a look of agonizing regret. "Clara," he said, his voice thick with emotion, "I am so sorry." He didn't know what to do next. He had been a man of action his whole life, a man who could solve any problem with money or power. But this was different. This was a problem of the heart. And then, it happened. A sudden, jarring noise from the next room. An alarm went off, and the lights began to flicker. There was a loud, sudden crack from the glass-walled building across the street. The city below them seemed to erupt in a sudden burst of panicked horns and sirens. A transformer had blown, and the building was now on emergency power. Clara's body began to spasm. The neurological monitor she was hooked up to began to shriek, a low, keening wail that pierced the silence. Mr. Sterling, panicked, tried to get to her, but he was stumbling, his mind unable to process the situation. "What is it? What's happening?" he shouted. Leo, however, was calm. He looked at Clara. He saw the sheer, unadulterated terror in her eyes. The medical theory about neurological spikes was correct. The sudden noise and chaos of the city had triggered a kind of system-wide shock in her body. He rushed over to her. He didn't touch her, didn't try to move her. He simply sat on the bench beside her, his voice a steady, unwavering beacon in the storm of chaos. "It's okay, Clara. It's okay. It's just a little bit of noise. Remember Grumble Grumble, the purple monster Lily drew? He's probably just down there having a bad day. He probably needs a hug. We all need a hug sometimes." His voice, a simple, human sound, seemed to cut through the shrieking of the monitor. He began to talk about Lily. He talked about her laughter, about her love for ice cream, about the small, everyday moments of joy that filled their lives. He talked about his own job, about the absurdity of corporate life, about the quiet satisfaction of a good spreadsheet. Slowly, imperceptibly, the spasms began to subside. The neurological monitors shrieking lowered to a hum, then to a low, rhythmic beep. Clara's eyes, which had been wide with terror, began to relax. They were still focused on Leo, but the fear was gone, replaced by a deep, beautiful calm. He wasn't trying to save her. He was just being with her. When the chaos in the city below them finally subsided, and the lights in the Sterling building came back on, Mr. Sterling was sitting on the floor, his head in his hands, staring at Leo with a mixture of profound awe and shame. You saved her," he whispered. "No, sir," Leo said, his voice still gentle. "I just reminded her she wasn't alone." From that day on, everything changed. The don't talk to her rule was replaced with a new, unspoken policy. Leo was not fired. He was, in fact, given a private office with a view of the city, right on the 40th floor, just down the hall from Clara's lounge. He was given a promotion, a salary that would cover Lily's medical bills and then some. But the greatest gift was the access. He would visit Clara every day, sometimes for just a few minutes, sometimes for an hour. He would bring her a small gift, a simple anecdote from his day, a new drawing from Lily. The two of them, the single dad and the CEO's paralyzed daughter, would sit and look at the city, a testament to the power of a single act of compassion. The CEO, Mr. Sterling, started joining them. He didn't talk much at first. He just sat, watching Leo and Clara, watching the quiet, beautiful exchange that had become their daily ritual. One day, he brought his own drawing. It was a crude sketch of a giraffe, drawn on a napkin with a ballpoint pen. He held it out to Clara, his hands trembling. She looked at it, then at him, her eyes filled with a new kind of light, a light that had been extinguished for years. The world still saw Mr. Sterling as the cold, ruthless titan of industry, but Leo and Clara knew him as something else entirely. A father humbled and healed by the quiet, defiant act of a single dad who had dared to ignore a warning, and in doing so, had opened a door to a lonely heart.